Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Wookieecast. Today we're here with Kwame Mbalia and to talk about his upcoming book, The Last Order, which will be out by the time this comes out. I wanted to thank you so much for sitting down with us today. Big fan of your work.
Thank you for having me. I'm incredibly excited about this, about our conversation, and about The Last Order coming out. I can't wait to shout at readers about the book.
Just as a quick warning for everyone, there may or may not be spoilers in this, so if you have not read the book, I would advise being careful where you tread. With that said, I'd love to get into a little bit of how you came to be involved in working on this project.
Yeah. I my very first book was Tristan Shaw Punches a Hole in the Sky. It was on the Rick Riordan imprint. It's a middle grade book, and that imprint is under Disney. And so when it came time for me to look at projects that are coming up, there was interest in hey, would you ever want to write for, Star Wars? We had I believe the High Republic was in its infancy stages and conceptual stages. And so it's like, hey, you want to write a middle grade book, and I'm big fans of, Daniel Jose Older and just, Ireland, and I love what they had done. I was like, absolutely, I would love to do a Star Wars middle grade book. Simultaneous to that, um, I was in this exact chair when I believe it was Esquire who did the preview, released the photos from the set
Mm.
from Rise of Skywalker. And I saw, there's, Poe, there's Finn, of course, and then there's Finn and Janna on I'm completely blanking on what the magnificent creatures are called, but the horse creatures. Um, that is going to haunt me until I figure out what it is. But we're gonna edit it in post. Um, they're and it just they look so magnificent. Here we go. And I tweeted, I was like, I would love to write a young adult Star Wars story about Finn and Janna and their time as stormtroopers, and things that might have led up to their defection and everything. And so I mean that was that like 4 or 5 years ago?
Yes, 2019 is when the
Um
film came out, so that's pretty long ago by now.
and so I always tell people whenever I'm talking to young people, I always say always write down your ideas, because you never know when they're going to come to fruition or when you'll need them or when they'll use them. So when I had the meeting, with the story group, and we're talking about and Lucasfilm Press, and we're talking about the possibility of what idea to write. I think I had printed it out. I pulled out a printout of that tweet. It was like, this right here, this is what I want. And they were like, we love it. We love it. We want to do it. It probably makes more sense as a young adult instead of a middle grade,
Mm.
but we need to make this happen.
Could you talk a little bit about the time frame it's set in? Because it is set kind of just slightly after the last film, would you say?
So the interesting thing about this book is it's dual timelines, right?
Mm.
So we start off immediately after the events of Rise of Skywalker, and sort of the chaos and the maelstrom that we are then, and we're in the point of view of a young teen who arrived to take part in the Battle of Exegol and just missed it, and is trying to figure out where they fit
Mm.
into this space of this post, fall of the First Order and rebuilding. Um, and they discover some legacies of the First Order. I'm not going to spoil it. I refuse. I refuse. They discover some legacies of the First Order that triggers some memories in the past of both it triggers some memories in the path of Finn and Janna, right? And we go back in time and we see Finn as he's a stormtrooper, and we go back in time and we see Janna when she's still a stormtrooper before she has defected. And we get an idea into the events that sort of begin to lay the groundwork for um, is this group that I'm a part of holding
Mm.
true to my own morals, right? And what does it mean for me to stay a part of this? So it's it's a hodgepodge of ideas of like what it means to be, as a teen, what it means to follow directions, what it means to stay in line, and what it means to do what's right. And then, just steeped in the wonderful, world building that the galaxy of Star Wars has to offer.
Yeah, for sure. Wikipedia is always super interested in when things are set. So I wanted to ask about that because our date references are like paragraphs long.
I listen, I have used your date references very, very much, and I thank you for that.
Um, but that is kind of interesting that that the story focuses on existing characters, but also introduces some new characters. One of the questions that we had was about Grohl, first officers, who is also called the Major, and we were curious if there's any particular inspiration for that character.
Major Grohl is like he's a hodgepodge um of villainy. And it is that insidious sort of villainy where it's, very charming, very um you're very comfortable in its presence. And there's an analogy where um that's very commonplace that's like, the frog doesn't know it's being cooked because it's put into the pot of cold water and it's being slowly being boiled. And that's how it is when you're around Major Grohl. Like you don't realize that what snares he has in you until you're already, being moved across the board as a piece, as
Mhm.
as a cog in his machine, right? Um, I had a lot of fun writing Major Grohl as a villain because like he doesn't have like a superpower. He doesn't have, he's not in tune to anything with the force or anything like that, or at least not knowingly. But if I had to say what his power is, he's very good at gaslighting. Like that is his
Yeah.
super ability. He is a gaslighter extraordinaire, making you believe that you are doing this on your own volition when you are just doing what he wants due to his machinations.
It's really interesting. And I guess for a somewhat younger audience, that manipulation is like interesting because, lots of themes there. And kind of going into the other new characters that you introduced, another one that we had a question about was Koi Tria and some of
Hmm.
the world building regarding that. There's a lot of familial, like this is what the family's always done, this is the culture around the tea and everything. And I'd love if you could talk a little bit about that because there's the very evil characters and then there's the not quite as so evil ones.
Yeah, Koi is I love Koi so much. There's such a interesting character because again, they left their family tea farm um to answer the call to join the battle, for Exegol, and was late. It's just like if my daughters had to do it, they would be 2 hours too late because traffic or whatever, couldn't get the car to work, couldn't get the ship to start. And so it's very much trying, Koi is very much trying to figure out where they fit into um the current state of the world, right? Because there's more to their world, their planet, this system, the galaxy, than their family tea farm. That's what they're learning. And yet I love it that, as they move through the story and they're faced with conflict and choices, it's that wisdom gained from living on the family tea farm and work and having to work that and studying under his grandfather that Coy begins to apply that to his current predicament. And we needed someone, obviously for this is a young adult novel. This is a novel for teens. We wanted the perspective of a teen, and Koi is a teen. Finn and Jana at the current stage are too old for that. So I wanted a new character, a
Mm.
new POV who's still unsure of themselves, untested, very much on this adventure to explore not only who they are, but what they mean to the outside world. And that's why I love that we get to follow Koi on this adventure.
Yeah, it's really interesting. a lot of young adult novels, they kind of struggle with that. It's like they're writing about super old characters or something, and it's not always the most relatable. Um, but kind of going into the established characters that you mentioned, Finn and Janna, those characters did have some lore. There's some existing odds and ends about their past. What was your research process for making sure that had it line up with the rest of continuity?
Oh boy. Listen, lots of tabs open for Wookieepedia, like lots of cross references, multiple screens, multiple desktops. I have a ultra wide monitor that I work on, and so I just have like six different web browser windows open just to make sure that I can cross reference. And I know, like, I'm going to get, I have a wonderful editor in Jen Hedl, and I know, Story Group and everyone at Lucasfilm Press, like they're going to help, but still, I want to make their jobs as easy as possible. And also, I want to know what I'm talking about as I'm writing the story. I'm using Wikipedia. I'm using, I have so many Star Wars um, I just call them my manuals, like the Star Wars complete vehicles with cross sections, Star Wars timelines. But and then each movie had their own um particular, their own little guide, little manual as well. And so I had all three of those in PDF, like blown up. I'm looking at Jana's, bow, trying to figure out how is it powered, double checking, what the boats are called and how they're powered up, and looking at Finn's, both of their, the stormtrooper uniform
Mm.
that they wear. And, there's a section, that we kind of open up with where we talk about them getting dressed, putting on their stormtrooper armor, and what goes on where, from the body glove and the, chest plate, the van braces, everything. And so all of that is coming from, I'm ashamed to say it, but I'm also not ashamed to say it. I'm very proud to say that even before I knew I'd be working on a Star Wars book, I have so many Star Wars guides and manuals and things bookmarked that I'm able to like sort of pull from. But I'm also reading, novelizations of the movies. I'm reading, comics and short stories that were, written before about their time. Like I'm pulling from that. Basically, I scraped the internet and the bookstores for as much info as possible about these characters because I wanted to get them right, and I wanted to, you know, backtrack as accurately as possible as to them in their teens and their personalities, trying to get that set so that it's believable as you're following them on this journey.
That's really interesting. What would you say is like one thing that you were able to kind of pull from your research and kind of work into the book? Because I know the Ansett Island kind of shows up, and that was originally mentioned in some guide or novelization or something. So, was there
There's
anything that you found that you were able to tuck in there?
Listen, you know how hard I looked for stuff on Ansett Island? Do you know how like I was like, there's gotta be more. I'm on, like I said, I'm on Wikipedia. I think there's a couple paragraphs there. There's a mention in a guide, a couple other places, but not a lot. It's a footnote. And one of the beautiful things about writing is that you've I consider it like almost like an accordion, or like a folded or crumpled piece of paper, right? Like you have this object, but there's so many little spaces in between where you can expand upon because there's not much information there, and that's where we drop in more bits of story. So with Ansett Island, I'm able to, look at how Jana talked about it, how it was mentioned, and sort of recreate this moment that finally pushes her to stand up and to defect. Um, but I'm also, like I'm looking at, well, how did the stormtroopers, how do they interact with each other when they're not training, when they're not on missions, when they're just on the ship before deployment, before they go to bed, like there's rivalries, there's competitions, there's friendship. Um, And so being able to pull some of that into it to expand upon the humanity of these characters was a really fun, tough, but fun endeavor to set out upon.
It's really interesting. The Ansett one, I know this, we flagged that as a question to ask you about early on because it's such a obscure thing that again it wasn't mentioned a lot. So I'm really glad it got expanded.
Listen, I
Now we
wish it
know.
wasn't so obscure. I wish it wasn't. I wish I had more to go off on. It feels like I'm building a Jenga tower with 3 blocks and like 12 ice cubes and, marbles, and it's not all stable.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see. Did you include any Easter eggs or references to perhaps other Star Wars works or other planets that you really like, other species that you really like within the book?
I mean, I found a couple of really cool species that I just thought they were fun to put in. Um, my Easter eggs are less from like they're like more from my life and less from
Mm.
like the Star Wars galaxy at large. Um, a fun fact, and I'll let readers out there guess which characters they are and which authors they come from. But if I need a name for like a side character and I don't have one ready, I will look at like smushing together the names of people that I know and creating them that way. Um, Especially if they die gruesomely, then I get to like point at them and laugh. But they don't. They don't die gruesomely, as far as you know.
Yeah, it's always interesting to know that. Might swing by and ask you about that once the book's out, I guess, and it's not a spoiler because we love to include that in a little behind the scenes section. Be like, this character was named after so and so,
Hmm.
and they died. Um, did you end up naming anything after your pets or anything fun like that?
um, I there is a there is a planet, and I should have had it booked up. Or there's a planet that I named after one of my favorite um one of my favorite characters from mythology. Um and they are associated with like thunder and lightning. And so the planet, which is in the book is called Tano Akora, is when they land there, it's a storm planet. It floods easily. Very few things live on the surface of the planet, and it's because it's named after one of my favorite, like I said, one of my favorite folklore characters, who's associated with the storm and folklore and lightning, and their name is Tano. Uh, from the Fante people and Akan mythology in West Africa. So it's fun to like pull from different
Mm,
cultures and folklore and include them in this wide galaxy, and associate them with things that they'd be associated with here.
that's really interesting. Kind of speaking of a lot of the locations you introduced, you did introduce a few new worlds or planets or what have you. Like, I think it's Myoka, if I not pronounce that correctly, and
Hmm.
Sardich system.
Hmm.
Did you have any thoughts on where in the galaxy those were located? Kind of like out and outer rim, or maybe closer to the
Oh,
core?
you're asking like I would have to pull up my notes, but like I did want to make sure that I could um like they could be accurately plotted. I would have to dig up my notes, but a lot of these I believe are if not, if I'm not mistaken, if not in the outer rim, was it wild space? It's very I would have to say, just because these are some of these are like out of the way planets and systems
Mhm.
that are away from hyperspace lanes and everything. Um and Major Grohl picks these locations because they're not going to get a lot of foot traffic, and the more insular and the more secluded a space is, the more resistant it is to change. And
Mm.
so if even if the first order falls, he would still be able to maintain control over all of these systems, no matter what. So they're in my notes somewhere. I have to pull out my I wish I had one of those holographic maps. It would make things so much easier.
I
You know
think
how
just
hard it
because,
is like plotting
yeah.
locations in 2D space? I need 3D to help.
Well, Jason Fry is currently mapping all the canon like star systems or what have you that appear in media. So I figured I'd ask ahead of time, see if you happen to know. And he'll end up plotting them probably at some point. So
I had a map on my iPad at one point, and then I spent so long and I was like doing so much on there that it almost bricked my iPad because it was so hot because of how much I was using it. Such a shame.
um, let's see. The I had one other thing here about the short story that you wrote in the From a Certain Point of View anthology, actually. Um, one of our readers had a question about why you picked Bib Fortuna for that story, if you remember.
Why I picked Bib Fortuna? Um, oh, you know what? I think I bet you if I go back in my emails I would find it, but I'm pretty sure the the was it not the Mandalorian, the Boba Fett, the Boba Fett show
Hmm.
had just started, and I believe at the is it the opening of the Boba Fett show that Bib Fortuna is there, and you realize that he has survived the explosion um of Jabba's, pleasure yacht. And I remember when the call first came out for those short stories, I was like, how did he make it out? What was the plan? Like, how did he not die? Because after, what is that episode? Is it episode
Six.
6?
Yeah.
It's episode 6, and like you don't hear about Bib anymore. And then he reappears in the Boba Fett show, and I was like, well, again, these are those hidden spaces and crevices where you can build stories and expand upon them. And I just like the idea of someone who, even though his reign doesn't last as a warlord, someone who clearly, despises his boss and eventually supplants him, usurps him,
Hmm.
takes advantage of chaos and rises to take over their position. I also love sort of dark comedies, like making it funny, and that I had so much fun writing that story, just from the Klatooine patty frogs and having to order shipments of those for Jabba the Hutt, and him imagining how many different ways he would try to kill his boss. Like I had a lot of fun writing that because it was very, very, very hilarious. And also, never underestimate the power of a good title. And Fortuna, the saying is, fortune favors the bold. And being able to say Fortuna favors the bold is just chef's kiss. I could have turned that in with nothing else, and it'd have been great.
Probably relatable to a lot of office workers. Just
I wouldn't know
frustrated.
that. I wouldn't know that. But if they want to read that short story and live vicariously through Bib Fortuna, I encourage it.
For
But I'm
sure.
very peaceful. I'm very peaceful.
To kind of get into a little bit of your backstory with Star Wars, when were you first introduced to the franchise? Probably as a fan at first.
Oh my gosh. Back when Blockbuster Video still existed, they used to have the posters in the window. And I remember we would go pick up whatever rental we were going to do for family night. And I remember seeing, the Luke holding the lightsaber up and Leia on one side and the helmet of Darth Vader on the other. And I just remember I've always been into fantasy. I'm a big Tolkien nerd. I'm a big um Narnia nerd, and so I love all of that sort of fan. And so seeing that, I was like, "What is this? What is this?" I'm also a huge science fiction fan, and so this was like the melding of both of my worlds at that point. I remember I would watch the marathons when they came on at like TNT at holiday time. I would watch, episode 4, 5, and 6 back to back. I remember where I was when the the prequel trilogy came out. I would go to the movie theater, not even to watch the movie. They would have the Pod Racer arcade game outside the in the lobby of the movie theater. I wouldn't even buy a ticket to the movie. I would just go sit in a Pod Racer because I was like, this is the coolest thing ever that I want to race pod racers when I grow up. Um, I've always been a Star Wars fan, and being able to introduce my kids to the universe has been, amazing. Being able to see how the world has expanded to shows and comics. I love the Darth Vader comics. So it would be impossible for me to nail down exactly when I realized I was such a fan, but I do know that as soon as I was able to have adult money, I was in trouble. Listen, I have a
Stormtrooper helmet.
I am in trouble. I write books so that I can buy Star Wars memorabilia and Cheez-Its. So
I mean, most people on Wikipedia can probably relate. We pretty much buy everything that comes out, and it certainly is an expensive hobby. So,
it's I have two lightsabers. Why do I don't need two lightsabers, but I have two of them.
mm, kind of pairing off that question, if you could pick one Wikipedia article that's your favorite or you would like to see completed, what would it be?
See, those are two very different questions. I I love when I was doing the research for Fortuna Favors the Bold short story. I love the Clatoine Patty Frog page. One, just because of the picture that's there, and how I remember Jabba the Hutt just slurping those things down. Um, Terrible. As someone who like doesn't eat shellfish or anything, like this is really I just had lunch too. But I love the page. I would really love the Ansett Island page to be expanded so that anyone else who's doing research on that would get more information. Because if I'm not mistaken, it's like four sentences, related to like the lore and everything. Because you have the Battle of Ansett Island and then you have Ansett Island. The battle is, you know, and it's like circular references. Like Ansett Island is where a battle took place, and then the Battle of Ansett Island happened on Ansett Island. And I'm like, you know what, guys, I'm trying to write a book here, and you are helping me in every way possible except for this. So it was probably my most frustrated I was. I was like, someone help me. Someone help me with Ansett Island, please.
I am actually pretty curious now that you mention it. Uh, Around when did you start working on the book? Because it seems like the page at least got completed to what exists in lore in 2024. So I'm curious, like when you started working on the book, because if it would have been before it was completed or
Oh,
after.
I mean, yeah, it's been a minute. It's been, I think, I want to say I started in 2023, maybe.
Oh. I
I
didn't
think
realize
that's
books took that long to, I mean, we don't know a
oh
lot about the production process, so didn't know they took.
oh yeah. I mean, there's a big lead up. Because you need marketing and review and
Mhm.
exposure and publicity. The cover needs to be created. So like we're working on these 2 to 3 years at least before the book comes to market to publish.
Interesting. Yeah, I just pulled up the page for Answer and it looks like it got completed in August 2024. So that would have been after you looked at it. So
Hmm.
interesting. Um, right. I wanted to thank you so much for sitting down with us today. If people would like to find you on social media and see what you're up to and your future projects, where can they find you online?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram and Threads at Mbalia1. You can find me on Blue Sky at kwamembalia.bluesky.com. And you can also just head to my website, kwamembalia.com, which I dutifully keep updated. And if you want to reach out, I have contact forms on there. It comes straight to me. So don't harass me. However, if you want to send me Klatooine patty frog recipes so that I can possibly change my mind and make that my new snack, I'm all here for it. Or if you have a good recommendation, I have the helmet, but I do need the rest of the stormtrooper armor. So if you
Mm,
have a good recommendation as to how I can either DIY it myself with foam or reasonably inexpensive purchasable, uh hit me up because I'm going to Comic-Con and I need this.
yeah, sure. Thank you so much, and have a lovely rest of your day.